Thank you for having me.
At the growth prospects in Italy, the reforms that have or have not been put in place, and this coalition government, are we going to have early elections?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly, the situation has been deteriorating steadily over the past few weeks. The impression is that the government is forced to change its growth forecasts, which were initially 1.5, then 1.0, then something between 1 and 0, and now barely positive growth. This, of course, has an impact also on public finance, which is becoming increasingly unsustainable. So there is a risk that debt begins to rise again, and this would impact negatively on confidence. Spreads would go up, and there will be a new recession situation because of this inability to manage the economy.
This government put a budget that Europe was against. Spreads went up, and then they backed down. What do they have to do next? Do they have to readjust the budget to make sure that they don't pick a fight with Europe?
Well, what Europe is looking for, markets are looking for, is not so much one figure, but a commitment to have a steady convergence towards structural balance. This is what European rules are about. And this government has continued saying that they would not respect the European rules. Actually, they're waiting for European elections to change the guard in the Commission and hopefully, from their point of view, change the rules and not being necessarily tied to fiscal constraint anymore.
Mr. Padoan, you would be expert across the 17 newspapers of London right now in that you're expert on the multiple party system of Italy. Is there a real risk with Brexit and all this uproar that they will go from two parties, Labour and Conservative, into becoming more Italian-like with multiple parties?
Well, of course, it's not so much that you have multiple parties, but where those parties are going. We have, in Italy, managed the political miracle of bringing together two parties that are the extreme of the political
spectrum. And it's working out well, right?
Well, it's working exactly in the wrong way it should work.
What does a hard Brexit, I don't know whether that is completely taken off the table, but what does a no-deal Brexit mean for Italy, and what does the European Union need to do to try and soften the blow?
Well, I think a hard Brexit would have especially medium to long-term consequences on Europe. And I am not one of those that believe that this is just a UK problem. This is also an EU problem. Of course, many mistakes have been made. I think Brexit, like the Italian elections outcome, are self-inflicted pain because of the lack of politics to manage correctly what needs to be managed. Yeah. So I'm concerned about if the hard or no-deal Brexit materializes, and I do hope that there's some flexibility on both sides to reach some form of an agreement, which is in theory possible.
Marco Polo a few years ago came out of Harry's bar in Venice and wandered off to China. This is certain history. Now the Chinese are coming to Italy. What is the symbolism? What does it signal that we see China courting Italy?
Well, China was a great empire even before Venice was built. So this is history coming back to some extent. But we have to separate two things. One is the economic incentives for Italian and European firms to strike agreements and contracts with Chinese counterparts. The other thing is the political meaning of a memorandum of understanding that has been signed in Italy by the Italian government with the Chinese authorities without looking for what really needs to be done, that is a European agreement. Europe, however, is still lagging behind in defining a global strategy, and this is showing a lot of the weakness that Europe is now going through.
We haven't even talked about the banks. Is it right that UniCredit should buy Commerzbank? Can, first of all, an Italian bank take that much risk on?
Well, first of all, UniCredit has been, with some shrewdness, pursued a policy of diversification and becoming more European and less nation-based. This is good for the Italian economy also. In terms of UniCredit looking at German banks, I am not familiar with the details, but I just read the news. This is part of the story. Of course, it must be remembered that German banks still have a very large presence of public participation that would, of course, give a different twist to the deal.
But do you think regulators are actually the mood of the music? Do we need a national champion before there's cross-border?
Well, on the sequencing of concentration and mergers and acquisitions, I have no religion. I think that there is a tendency which needs to be picked up of banks getting larger, and also because of the new technologies pushing banks to be larger and multifunctional. So I hope that this is part of that view, of that strategy.